It happened when I was in grade 2. I was in Mrs. Seuss's class. There's me. There we were on a weekday morning in school, but we weren't at our desks. We were putting on our boots and our shoes. Clearly we weren't putting on our shoes like this. Our grade 2s had some learning to do, I guess. Our jackets and our shoes and our boots, and we all got onto these buses, and the whole school drove out on the country roads because something special was going to happen. Something unique was going to happen on these country roads. We were there for a little bit, and all of a sudden, in the distance, a caravan started coming towards us. And at the head of the caravan was a man in a wheelchair. Rick Hansen, the man in motion. He was on his tour across the nation, across the world, to raise money, to raise awareness for people with spinal cord injuries. And it was cool. It was electric. It was a moment that I remembered even to now. I tried to get my mom to find a picture. There's a picture from the Ridgetown newspaper with my dad and Rick Hansen. I wanted that picture to put up today, but we couldn't find it. But we got to meet Rick Hansen. I remember that. I remember that day. Did any of you see Rick Hansen when he went through? Did any of you see Terry Fox on his run? You know, Terry Fox, Rick Hansen, especially Terry Fox. He had a huge impact on people's lives. Terry Fox had a huge impact, a formative impact on our nation. Right? What happens every fall? Terry Fox run. It impacted how we did things. Today we are going to talk about a major formative impact, a major formative event in the life of Israel. The Passover. It's the formative event in the life of Israel. Later writers would think back to that time when God brought them out of slavery, and they would say, once you were not a people, you were just nobodies. But then God did the Exodus through the Passover, and you became somebodies. You became God's very own people. Passover is the formative event for them. And what's more, Passover sets the template. It shows us how God works to redeem people. You want to know how God saves people? It looks like the Exodus. The Passover is actually a picture of salvation. Deliverance, Exodus, bringing out of people by the blood of a lamb. What God did at Passover, bringing Israel out from slavery and destruction by the blood of a lamb, God did through Jesus, bringing us out of slavery to sin and death. Today I want to take you to the Passover, the institution of the Passover, and I've been praying this week that our hearts would be warmed to God, that we would see how this is not just some weird Old Testament thing, but this is a picture of how God saves us through Jesus. And I pray that we would be moved to live in light of the Lamb. Okay, let's set the stage. Israel has been in slavery for Egypt, at least 400 years. They have been worked to the bone by these genocidal taskmasters who would like to get rid of them. They see Israel as a threat, but they don't really want to get rid of them because Israel is the backbone of their economy. Right? You kill the slaves, you lose the free labor. So they work them as hard as they can, but not too hard. God heard Israel crying out in misery. And it says last week, we heard God remembered his promise to Abraham. Not, oh yeah, I forgot about you guys, but I'm going to act. So he appoints this deliverer, Moses, this reluctant servant who was so focused on himself that he wouldn't go for it. But when he started to fix on God, he realized, man, we can do this. God can lead me. And we are going to do something significant. Well, God will do something significant. Moses went to Pharaoh repeatedly, demanding that Pharaoh let the people go. Pharaoh refused, even though God was backing that up with these terrible plagues that it says ruined Egypt. Now, chapter 11, God speaks to Moses one more time, and he says, I am going to send one more plague. And this is going to be the mother of all plagues, the plague to end all plagues, the worst of all. Exodus 11 says this, this is what the Lord is about to do. About midnight I will go through Egypt. Every firstborn son in Egypt will die, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh who sits on the throne to the firstborn son of the slave girl who sits at her handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. There will be loud wailing throughout Egypt, worse than there has ever been or will ever be again. There will be death in every house. Now here's the thing. The people of Egypt, the Egyptians, are not the only ones who are in danger. Right? The Egyptians are, you can see from that, the livestock is in danger. Israel is in danger from this plague too. We might reasonably pause and ask, well, why would Israel need to be delivered from this plague? Because we've seen them delivered from flies and gnats and hail. In all of those plagues, Israel was not touched by it. But God is about to give them instructions to keep them safe when this plague comes. Why did they need to be protected from the destroyer? At the heart of it is this. God is about to take these unholy people, bring them out of slavery, and make them his very own people. Now, how does an unholy people come to be in a relationship with an utterly holy God who reacts to sin the way that gasoline reacts in the face of fire? Right? How do sinners come to be near people, to be near God without being consumed? There's nothing inherently better about being an Israelite than being an Egyptian. The Israelites live under the fall. They are just as guilty of sin as the Egyptians are. As Paul would say, they are dead in sin, reluctant to trust God. In fact, you probably know the story. They come out of Egypt, but before they're at the Red Sea, the Israelites are already saying, "Oh, I don't think that God's actually going to deliver us. We don't trust him. Didn't we say to you, Moses, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to die in the desert. It would have been better to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." They're faithless people. In order to be delivered from slavery into God's favor, God's own people, Israel, needed to be made holy. Their unworthiness had to be taken care of. And the Passover is how God did it. I'm going to walk you through a series of steps. It's pretty straightforward. The first point that we're going to look at is this. Israel, you need a lamb. Join me in Exodus. We're going to go to Exodus 12, verse 1. So when you're starting at the beginning of the Bible, go past Genesis, and then Exodus is there. Chapter 12, verse 1. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, "This month is to be the first year, the first month of the year." God's going to reorient their lives, so he's going to reorient their calendar too. So this yearly festival that he's going to give them happens at the head of every year, so they remember it. "Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor, having taken into account the number of people that there are. You are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will need." So, Israel, you need a lamb. And there's two things that you need to know about this lamb. First, it has to be representative. Verse 4, look what it says. "If any household is too small for a lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor. You are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. Not too much, not too little, just enough, like Goldilocks." Why is that important? This lamb is going to represent the people who eat it. The lamb is going to stand for the people who eat it. Each person then must be accounted for, because they're going to take part in eating this lamb that's actually going to become a substitute for them. So it is a representative lamb. The second thing is this. It's got to be perfect. Look at verse 5. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or the goats. Okay, sheep, goat, doesn't matter. Lamb has really caught on in common usage. But here's the thing. It needs to be without defect. It needs to be perfect. Since it is going to stand for a sinful group of people, it needs to be sinless. Otherwise, it would need a sinless substitute, right? And this is the Lord's Passover sacrifice. This is the language that we hear in verse 27. It's a sacrifice. And you don't offer God less than perfect sacrifices. That would be at its most basic level, like saying, here, Mom, happy Mother's Day. Here's a cupcake with the icing licked off the top. You don't give less than perfect sacrifices. So, you need a lamb. It's representative. It's got to be perfect. What's the lamb for? Here's the next big point. The lamb's death is going to deliver you. It's not just, hey, keep a lamb around the house, because lambs are so darn cute, and if you've got a cute lamb in your house, you'll feel so good about yourself. The lamb's going to die, and that lamb will play a part in you becoming free. First, let's see. Its death will get you out of slavery. That's the first big point. It will deliver you. Look with me at verse 6. You've got your lambs. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the people of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. So they're keeping their lambs with them for 4 days. They got to make sure they're not getting blemished. They get to know them, because it's representative. Of course, it's normal to keep livestock in your house at this point. Sometimes I wonder if we have livestock in our house with our children. Then, verse 7, they are to take some of the blood and put it on the tops and the sides of the doorframes of their houses where they eat the lambs. That same night they will eat the meat roasted over a fire, along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the meat raw or cooked in water, but roast it over the fire, head, leg, inner parts. Don't leave any of it until the morning. Verse 11. This is how you are to eat it. With your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. This is the Lord's Passover. So this lamb is going to deliver you. It's going to deliver you out of Egypt, a geographical space. That's the first point. That's the implication of verse 11. Look at it. This is how you are to eat it. With your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, eat it in haste. God knows that what he is about to do is to bring Israel out of Egypt so quickly that there's not even going to be time for the bread to rise. The yeast won't cause the bread to rise. It's going to be so fast. So this is travel language. Be ready. Imagine you're at the airport on standby, right? Your plane could leave at any minute, but you're hungry, so you want to grab a bite to eat. You eat it with your backpack on, standing up, passport in your pocket, right? Same idea. Tuck your cloak in, get your sandals on, get ready to move. God's going to get you out of Egypt. How will he get you out of Egypt? Well, they've taken its blood. They've smeared the blood around the doorframes of their homes. This is the way that God is going to deliver them out of slavery. Verses 12 and 13. On that same night, I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn, both men and animals, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. So, if you have the blood on your house, you're safe. But if you don't, you lose your firstborn. And this is the way that God brings Israel out, right? The Pharaoh and his people say, we can't handle this anymore. Get out of here. Take our gold. Forget being our slaves. Take our gold. And don't let the door hit you on the way out. See, the death of the lamb is going to protect from the plague. The plague is going to force Pharaoh to send them out. So this lamb's death is going to deliver them from slavery. But if you pay attention, there's one more thing. They're being delivered from a third thing. And that's God's wrath. The lamb's blood is going to protect them against God's judgment. Look again at verses 12 and 13. We just read them, but look again at it. On that same night, I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn, men and animals, and I will bring judgment. Who brings judgment? God. God is doing that. It's not just the gods of Egypt, but all those who are under their supposed care, right? Well, if you're the God of Egypt, why aren't you protecting those people? Not a very good God if you allow the firstborn to be struck down. The blood will be a sign for you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. Well, why? Why will no plague touch them? Is it something special about being an Israelite? No, they are just as vulnerable as Egypt. How do I know that? Look at verses 21 and 23. Moses said to the elders of Israel, "Go at once and select the animals for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip the blood in the basin, put it on the top and both sides of the doorframe. Not one of you shall go outside until morning. Don't you dare go outside, Israelites, or you're likely to get knocked down too. When the Lord goes through the land," this is verse 23, "to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the tops and the sides of the doorframe and pass over your doorway, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter your house and strike you down." The destroyers act to come in to Israel and get them. But not if the blood's there. They need that protection too. They need to be protected from God's judgment. So, Israel, you need a lamb. Its death is going to deliver you from slavery, from Egypt, from God's wrath. Here's the third thing. You got to remember it. You got to remember this lamb. See, this whole thing is so crucial, so formative, that God rejigs their calendar. Right? He says, okay, here's the beginning of the year, Passover. You got to remember this. Not, well, I hope you'll remember it, like Gladstone remembered meeting Rick Hansen when he was in grade 2. But you got to remember it. And here's how. God establishes a yearly festival to help them to remember. Verses 14 to 17. "This is the day that you are going to commemorate. For generations to come, you shall celebrate it as a lasting festival, a lasting ordinance. For 7 days, you eat bread made without yeast." It goes down. Let's go to 17. "Celebrate the feast of unleavened bread, because it was on this very day that I brought your divisions out of Egypt. Celebrate this day as a lasting ordinance for the generations to come." God wants Israel to remember this day. He wants them to remember the lamb. So he gives them the Passover festival as a lasting celebration. Literally, it's a celebration that will last into the ages, a celebration for the ages. All generations need to practice it. And there is actually this neat little section in the contemporary Hebrew Passover liturgy. This is from a book published a couple years ago. This is what Jewish families might use in their homes. It says you need to feel as if you were literally present in Egypt. You need to feel as if you were delivered for yourself from your house, no matter where in history you live. So every generation has to remember it. Verses 14 to 17 tell us this is how you do it. You clean out your house of yeast. Then you have the Passover. Then you have another 7 days. And then there's a holiday there as well. It's a very practical way for them to celebrate and to remember the lamb. Okay, God tells his people, you need to remember this saving event. Here's a festival. It's going to be practiced. It's a lasting festival. Now, not only is it a lasting festival, it is to be a reminder. Don't just do it. Remember why you are doing it. My mentor recently told me this story about an interim pastor who came to a church probably like this one, and he found this really strange phenomenon happening. At the beginning of the service, everybody started sitting over on this side of the church. And at the same time, every service, the church would get up from this side, and everybody would come over and sit on this side. And, this interim pastor looked at it and thought, well, why on earth is this happening? Nobody knew why they were doing it. So eventually, in his pastoral visit, this interim pastor apparently came across an old-timer, an older guy who used to go to the church, was in a nursing home at that point. So this older man says, oh, well, that's easy. I can explain that. where the furnace used to be. And in the morning it was cold, so everybody sat over there. But then by the end of the service, it was way too hot, so everybody came over and sat on this side. And they just kept doing it. It's not enough to just do it. You got to remember while you're doing it. Verses 25 and 27 show us. You got to remember. This is why we do it. Why we eat with why do you eat the lamb with your sandals on and your cloak tucked in? Verse 25, when you enter the land that the Lord has promised to you, observe this ceremony. And when your children ask you, what does this ceremony mean to you? Tell them it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt and spared our homes when he struck down the Egyptians. See, built right into the Passover itself is this moment where you say, kids, remember. Daddy, what does this mean? God saved our people. God brought us out. Not because we were slaves, we earned enough money, we bought our freedom. Not, we got enough angst together and pulled a Spartacus and got out of Egypt by our own strength. God brought us out. This is why we do this. It's a lasting festival. It's a reminder. It's also a reason to give thanks. You know, our instinct, when we probably hear this, is to go, ew, gross. Think of all that blood. Ugh. Imagine what the animal rights activists would say, right? But look at how the Israelites respond. Verse 27, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord. The people bowed down and worshipped. Right? God says, you got to do this with a lamb. They didn't think about what was happening to the lamb. They didn't think about the blood. They heard, wait, the God of our fathers is answering our prayers. The God that we've already seen tear through Egypt with plagues of frogs and flies and gnats and darkness, he's going to do it again, and he says he's going to preserve us. But how do we know that we're safe? Right? Like, let's not sugarcoat this. Get into the psyche of the people of Israel. They're slaves. They've been slaves for years. All they've known is slavery. They're terrified, I'm sure, of their Egyptian taskmasters. I'm sure they're even more terrified of what might happen to them if they try to escape. But now God says, I'm going to deliver you, but God is dangerous. He says he's going to let the destroyer off the leash. How do we know we'll be safe? I skimmed over a little verse a little point in verse 13. It says, the blood will be a sign for who in verse 13? The blood will be a sign for you, Israel. God's about to let the destroyer off the leash in Israel. How do we know that we're safe? It's the blood. It's a sign for you. God knows where they are. God knows exactly where they are. They just need to trust that if they put the blood there, they'll be safe. And trusting, they have a reason to give thanks. They have a reason to worship. In Hebrew, verse 27 is a little redundant. It says they gave thanks, they bowed down and worshipped. It's literally two Hebrew words. They bowed down and bowed down. This is, wow, God, I'm in awe of you, I'm in reverence. This was an opportunity to say thank you. And if you know Charlton Heston and the Ten Commandments, or the Bible version, this unfolded exactly as God said that it would. Just to bring it to completion, Exodus 12, 29 to 31. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all of the livestock as well. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was loud wailing in Egypt. For there was not a house without someone dead, the firstborn or a lamb. During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, up, leave, you, get out. Go, worship the Lord, as you requested. And so they went. In that stretch of text, God shows us what salvation looks like. People delivered by the blood of a lamb. You see, you need to be protected by the blood of a lamb. You need a lamb. Its death will deliver you. You got to remember it. Well, great, you say, but I'm not Jewish. enslaved in Egypt? What does this have to do with me? Excellent question. To answer that, let me point you back to our big idea. This isn't just about a weird Old Testament thing. The Passover shows us what salvation looks like. People are delivered through the blood of a lamb. See, God is consistent. All through the Bible, God works in ways: pattern, fulfillment; practice, fulfillment; prophecy, fulfillment. God gives us pictures of how he works. And then in Jesus, we see it fulfilled. We see the fullness of it. And Passover is the big one. Turn with me now to Mark. We're going to skip all the way to the middle. Past the middle. Matthew, Mark in the New Testament. Mark 14. We're going to start at verse 12. Mark 14, starting at verse 12. Don't worry, I won't go as in depth into this one as I did Egypt. On the first day of the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, they're doing the festival. When it was time to sacrifice the Passover lamb, they're doing what they were told to do in Egypt. Jesus' disciples said, "Where do you want us to go and make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" So he sent disciples. They go in. Jesus miraculously knows this is where it should be. Verse 16, the disciples left, went into the city, and found things just as Jesus had told them. So they prepared the Passover. Jesus and his disciples are about to do exactly what it is we saw our Israelites commanded to do. They're good Jewish people. They're remembering God bringing out the ancestors. They're going to have a Passover meal. Awesome. It's passing through to the generations. It's a lasting ceremony. Okay. Verse 22. You can see all the stuff in between there, what happens. But verse 22, while they were eating, Jesus took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take, this is my body." Then he took the cup, gave thanks, and offered it to them, and they all drank from it. "This is the blood of my covenant, which is poured out for many," he said to them. Wait. If this is a Passover meal, where's the lamb? He's talking about bread. Okay, that makes sense. They had the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But he's talking about wine. Okay, but where's the lamb? If this is a Passover meal, where's the lamb? Jesus is doing something stunning here. He sits at this Passover celebration and he says, yes, we should do it. Yes, we should remember it. Yes, we should give thanks. But the Exodus, that first Passover, that thing that we've spent all that time talking about now, was a foretaste, just a foretaste, of the deliverance that God was going to accomplish in the world. The reality is that Israel's physical slavery in Egypt mirrors our spiritual slavery to sin and death. Without God, we are slaves to sin. We go after our own desires. We know what we should do, but we don't do it. We do the things that we don't want to do. That's being enslaved to sin. I know it's not a very culturally sensitive thing to say, but that means that we are guilty. We deserve God's judgment. Unless we have been perfect and never, ever, ever in our lives acted out of selfishness, then we have fallen short of God's glorious ideal. And we are vulnerable to destruction. So we need a lamb. We need a lamb who will represent us. We need a lamb whose perfection will outweigh our own imperfection. At the Passover meal that we just read, Jesus says, "I am that lamb." He's saying to them, I am going to die. My death is going to deliver you from slavery to sin. My death on the cross will protect you from God's judgment, because I am a perfect lamb. I will die in your place, he says. And here's how. This bread, it used to say, look how quickly God got us out of Egypt. Now it says, look how God got us out of Egypt. Through the death of his son. His body broken on the cross for us. And then the cup. There's actually 4 cups of wine written into the Jewish Passover liturgy. Between Moses and Jesus, they write in 4 different cups of wine. So Mark in Mark, Jesus picks up the one and he says, "This is the blood of my covenant." Remember in Abraham's day how you cut a covenant? Slice the animals in half, so may it be to me if I break the terms of this covenant. The blood binds and seals the covenant. Jesus is going to say, "My blood seals the new covenant. And I have come to die in your place because I will bear the weight of your failure to keep that covenant." This is the grace of God. This is the gospel. A lamb to die instead of us. Have you trusted him? Have you applied the blood, as it were, to the doorframes of your life? If you have, then you are safe from destruction, safe from judgment for all eternity. Here's a second question that might help you to answer the first. Is the death of Jesus on the cross the formative event in my life? The Passover was the formative event in the life of Israel. There's a really subtle shift between chapter 11 and chapter 12. From Exodus 1 to 11, Israel is called the sons of Israel. They're defined in terms of who they were related to. From chapter 12 onwards, they're called the congregation of Israel. They're defined now by what God did for them. No longer who we used to be, who we're related to. The formative event happened. They are now defined by what God has done for them. Same with us. We are a new people. Have you allowed the cross to define your life? If so, live in light of the Lamb. Let's pray together. Father, thank you for the Lamb. Thank you for Jesus. God, we've covered a lot of ground. There is a whole lot going on in that Exodus account, in that Passover account. And it points to these central realities. We need a lamb. Its death will deliver us. We got to remember it. Father, would you take those ideas and screw them tightly into our hearts? Jesus, may your death on the cross define us. Make that the formative moment in our lives. And as we come to the table now, I pray that you would work, continue to work, God. Shape us, remake us in light of the Lamb. We pray in Jesus' name.